Welcome back and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. I am Kenneth Shark Kinney, your host and Chief Shark Officer. Growing customers is always tough, especially when performance marketing is driven by the right tools, team, channel strategies, regulations, agency partners, and more. It's a lot even in the best of times, so I wanted to take an episode where we hear from someone, not unlike you, who's dealing with this every day as well. It's a story of miracles, if you will, so I hope you're listening. Nataly Huff is the Vice President of Marketing for Miracle Ear for Amplifon Americas. And on this episode, we'll discuss performance marketing technology, accessibility and content, hiring the right kind of marketer, measuring intent, brand side versus agency, myths and challenges from bad advice heard in the marketing space, HIPAA, targeting the right kind of audience on the right kind of social, 3.2 miles of giant malls, Russian sharks, and a lot more. And you're also going to hear about a new sponsor of the show who I'm really excited to work with, have worked with for years, and we're going to get My World Domination Tour for sharks, at least this one, swimming just a little bit faster. So let's tune in to a VP with some miracle ears, with a shark whose ears are always listening, on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Nataly, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. Tell us a little bit about your career path, your journey to date.
Oh, absolutely. And Kenneth, thank you for having me here. It is fantastic when I get to spend an hour or two just talking about marketing and all the different things that marketing can do. It's usually what I do with my friends over a bottle of wine, so it's fun to do it even virtually like this.
Right.
My name is Nataly Huff. I am the VP of Marketing for Miracle Ear, which is the most well-known brand for Amplifon Americas. I've been in marketing for what feels like my entire life. I'm not sure that's necessarily accurate, but originally I started my marketing world in advertising, moving from there to startup, where, as you probably most of you have experienced in startups, you have to be a jack of all trades and wear all the hats, which is always a wonderful learning and growth opportunity. From there, moving into digital specifically, and kind of taking Miracle Ear through a digital transformation and bringing it to where we are with digital marketing today, helping stand up the MarTech stack that we have now, including CRM automation, and finally took on the VP role, trying to make sure that we have a holistic integrated approach, as well as a strong focus on differentiation and bringing value to the end user.
Well, and I also felt the same way that I've been doing marketing my whole life, although I don't think my parents wanted to read me Seth Godin's early books. But you got a kid now. You can read Seth Godin stories going to bed and get them started early. But I'm really curious, what are the challenges facing you today in performance marketing, a space that's near and dear to me that I've worked in for most of my career? But this is sort of pre-pandemic and to current, it's always a little bit of a challenge. But talk a little bit about the challenges you're seeing today and how you're getting over them.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's been quite a shift in how consumers both consume media as well as think about their purchases or not think about their purchases in a pandemic world. We know that if you're in a high interest category, there's a lot more opportunity. There's a lot more content digestion, both digitally and on TV. So there's a lot of opportunities to be present in front of an audience. And if you are selling something that is either very high interest or can be an impulse buy, there's a lot of opportunities there. I know I myself have purchased an immense amount of products, snacks, and clothing just based on the ads that have been served to me that otherwise I wouldn't have seen otherwise. That being said, if you're in a low interest category, the world has become a whole lot more challenging. For consumers that are maybe postponing something that wasn't very pleasant anyway, or something that actually requires them to visit a location, it's becoming a lot more challenging to drive response through the advertising that you have. This is where the focus really starts to shift from creating that immediate reaction to creating that need, right? If you think about Miracle Ear, Miracle Ear's focus is to bring better hearing and better lives to their consumers. So talking about the cool technology is going to be one element, but it's still a hearing aid, and people still don't see hearing aids wearable technology, which, someday we'll get to. But if you talk about the need to communicate, especially in a pandemic world, the need to be able to understand and communicate and connect via telecommunication, on Zoom calls, on FaceTime calls, all of those elements are the ones that will help you drive that response. Response rates are still not where they were before. They're still not there. But if you are able to drive that response, that's a much more quality response, and it tends to convert better down the purchase journey after they engage.
Then how are you doing that? How are you showing them the need? For example, I think that what the point, especially with just being able to hear on a Zoom call, for example, not every service has got an automatic transcription service either. So
No.
not everybody's going to jump on a Zoom call and figure out that it doesn't work well. Now I need to go get Miracle Ear. So how do you sort of show that you're a solution for that in that noisy world?
Some of that is about just representation, right? Showcasing the fact that these are the challenges that people are having. Some of these things happen naturally. With the hearing loss, there's a lot of people that end up adapting their lifestyle and adapting their communication style to read lips, for example, in order to understand the communication. Well, we've put on masks now, and that whole coping mechanism has disappeared. So for us to bring that as a topic and bring that as potentially content that can reflect the experience that the potential customer might be having, we would be able to connect with them from that standpoint. Additionally, in some cases, you got to pull in those heartstrings as well. You've got to show them what they're missing, especially now that they're missing it more specifically. The concept of those family dinners, those family connections, the heartwarming smiles, all of those things really make people feel, and you have to drive that connection to why that might be missing in the world, not necessarily just because there's a global pandemic, which is kind of a big deal, but also because there's a whole sense that they're not able to rely on to help drive that connection. And last and not least, it's just about being there. There's many brands out there that are still very much focusing on conversion. They're still very much focusing on the sale, but we're all tired. We're all emotionally drained. So creating a supportive message, a message of recognition of where people are, and a here for you message is also helping kind of drive some of those connections.
Well, you mentioned this when you stepped into the role and moved into the VP role, but how are you looking at integrating all the channels together now to really drive that? Because integrated marketing plans, I'm still amazed how many people don't integrate this from A to Z within their brand, but it happens all the time and it can be a challenge to implement.
And it also depends on how a marketing team evolves within an organization. So think of it from the standpoint, if you have a organization that has now focused on evolving specifically digital marketing, or specifically evolving direct response marketing, or specifically focusing on brand awareness, or specifically focusing on CRM, the focus that is pulled into that particular area oftentimes creates an unintentional silo. So as you're building these functions up, it automatically creates little pockets of efforts and initiatives that don't quite talk to each other. So to answer your question.
And by the way, let me add to that. Your customer does not care what silos you create.
Absolutely not.
Everybody gets so very narrowly channel focused.
Absolutely, absolutely. Or some people kind of look at social and email as completely two separate channels that don't exactly involve new customer acquisition and CRM marketing. In either case, the point is that it takes a lot of work, and different channels require different tactics and different approaches and different messaging, and it needs to be more than the logo and colors that tie it all together. Something as simple as a promotional calendar can help weave that thread all the way across and making sure that we're all on the same page. Something a little bit more sophisticated than that is kind of a campaign playbook that attaches itself to every single one of the promotional calendars. But in all honesty, we're still working on it. This is something that is the goal and the dream, and I don't know of any brand that has gotten it 100% right yet. And this is where I think There's a lot of technology that helps enable these processes. There's digital asset managers that help trying to kind of put all these together. But there's not a simple solution. There's not a simple answer. There's not a simple path. It takes work. It takes content strategy, creative strategy, and planning and communication and integration. And when you add all of those layers in there, oftentimes you can take out agility. So of course it becomes easy if you're a smaller startup where you have a total of 3 people. It's very easy for you to sit at a desk together and put it all together. But if you're looking at one-to-one personalization in your CRM and you're looking at over 300 versions of messages that are going out to your different segments every single day, connecting that whole network to the TV campaign and the direct mail audiences and the social audiences and the search intents it takes a lot of work.
So now let me tell you about a new sponsor for the show making a big splash, if you will. Your favorite shark would only work with the best, and I've worked with a great team at Invoca for several years now. From marketing to sales and commerce to CX, Invoca's active conversation intelligence platform enables revenue teams to create better buying experiences, drive more leads, and increase revenue. Trusted by top brands like Dish Network, Mayo Clinic, Mutual Omaha, Pods, and SunTrust, Greg and the Invoca team are doing some amazing work in turning conversion data into automated action to enhance digital touchpoints and human interaction. Thank you, Invoca. So now, back to the show. How do you look at hiring the right types of performance marketers that fit into that mix to really, again, stitch all the pieces together?
This is an ongoing challenge, especially we're in a market that is big. There's a lot of competition for marketing talent with where we are. So
finally, yay.
Seriously. So for us, it's a focus on the type of mindset. We're looking for people who are happy to dream, but aren't looking to perfect at step 1. So when you come back to how I structure my team, right? My goal is to make all the accountabilities incredibly clear. When I ask a question of how this is doing, you are going to be the one that's going to answer, and you're going to answer to this one, and you're going to answer to this one. But step 2 is making sure that the overlaps between those accountabilities are very intentional and also very clear. As in when we talk about these 2 segments, let's look at it that way. These 2 segments, they overlap right here. And you're going to be the owner and you're going to be the stakeholder, and you need to make sure that you're talking about this nonstop. Those overlaps can't happen accidentally. You need to be very intentional. And the last one is you need to align people's roles with their strengths. And in organizations that are evolving as fast as Miracle is evolving, as well as fast as marketing is evolving, the role that you ended up taking evolves very quickly. So over the course of the year, the role that you are doing is going to be different from the role that you started with. From there, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to that and seeing where people's passions align, as well as people's strengths, so you can adjust those responsibilities and kind of remain flexible. From there, it's giving people some breadth, giving people a chance to say, I know this is not necessarily my job, but I see this opportunity and I think we should take it. And aligning people on what the end goal is, so that you can always have that North Star to check in and say, it's a great idea, but it's a little bit off the side of where we're going. So how do we pay attention to the North Star?
Yeah, and I would imagine that it's probably a little bit of a challenge too, because there's nothing wrong with Amplifon and Miracle Air. I mean, it's a fantastic product. It's serving an audience, and I mean truly serving with a big benefit, as opposed to a lot of products and services that are vanity, for example. Is it harder to find the kind of people that help believe in that? Because I almost think of it not in the same way, but almost like a nonprofit where you're serving an audience, as opposed to just nonstop selling to them that you have the bigger, shinier, faster car.
I think we are in a very good spot in terms of being in the middle. Yes, we're never going to be Apple. We're never going to be Coke. So no, Nobody's going to dream about creating a brand for Miracle-Ear. That being said, we're a well-known brand. We're the best known brand for hearing health, and how many people are actually impacted by hearing loss is incredibly significant. Everybody has a friend or parent or grandparent that either has had hearing aids or should get hearing aids. So the number of conversations that I have when somebody asks me, where do I work? The number of conversations that I have, oh my God, my dad needs to talk to you, is incredible.
Right.
So COVID is another thing that has been helpful with this as well, because people have started realizing, and it's not COVID specific, but 2020, we've had some opportunities to reflect on what we believe in and what we stand for. So there's very many people who are looking to join organizations that have a purpose, and a purpose that makes them feel good. This is where having a recognized brand and having a purpose is very helpful. We're still never going to be Apple, and I think that's okay. I think we are looking for people who can be passionate about more than the dollar signs, who can be passionate about the number of people that have been helped and the number of lives that have been improved.
Well, it really does give you a benefit, though, without having to go find a purpose. You've already got a great built-in purpose. So when you look at, you've got people focused on the channels, you got people focused, I'm sure, on search and social and all those good things. How are you looking at attributing success to each of those channels across your various campaigns and holistically as a brand?
I think this is where intent comes to play very closely. And again, being in the market where we are, we're kind of lucky in how the conversion process goes. There's not really foot traffic that comes into Miracle-Ear locations. Again, not a very high interest category. You're not just going to stroll in to check out some hearing aids, although maybe someday we'll get there. It's about the fact that somebody needs to make an appointment. So that action of making an appointment allows for really incredibly granular trackability, whether it's online booking, which of course comes with all of the blessings of digital data, or a phone call. That phone call also gives us a lot of clarity and visibility into the sources and the conversions and the connections down funnel. We use a vendor called Invoca, which has been an absolute godsend from the ability to understand who the people are that are calling, where they're coming from, and actually capture the data and the marketing data that we want to attribute, and connecting it to where it needs to go. They have incredibly robust conversational analytics tools that are kind of algorithmic in their nature, that allow for real-time understanding of the context of the conversation, not just the fact that a call has been made, because as we all know, the number of spam and robocalls that are out there in the US right now is a little bit insane. Mm-hmm. So this allows us to actually filter for quality as well as quantity.
When you think about content marketing in particular, mm-hmm. I've had this conversation many times, especially with friends of mine who are deaf and how they consume, but this applies to people, whether they're blind, deaf, or hard of hearing or anything like that. Do you approach your content and the delivery any differently, you think, because you're in a sort of a natural hard of hearing environment?
Yes. And I'll give you two answers. One is specific to kind of content creation. We talk about needing to be very intentional and very thoughtful as to how the content is delivered, how easy it is to enable closed captioning, how easy it is for an e-reader to read our pages, etc.
Which may sound like basic stuff, but a big chunk of marketers forget to do this every day.
And they forget to do it because that's not their core demographic. This is our core demographic, so we have to be very intentional about it. But we also need to be very careful as to how intentional we are. We serve its senior demographic, specifically boomers and some of the silent generation. And we need to make sure that, obviously, according to ADA standards, everything is readable, but potentially we need to increase our font just a little bit more for the target demographic that we have. But we can't do it to the extent where it almost becomes comical or patronizing. And there's a very fine line there to make it accessible without necessarily making it painful. On the other side of not just the how, but the what. The content that we need to deliver for the audiences should help, again, highlight the elements that they are missing and maybe aren't realizing that they're missing. Let me give you an example. When we showcase our subject, whether it's video or images, the subject is never alone, because one of the biggest side effects, for lack of a better term, of hearing loss is isolation. So people tend to withdraw because conversations are challenging, because it is exhausting to try and pay attention and to listen really, really closely and understand the conversation. And we don't want that for the world. We want people to have those connections, to have those communications. So when we showcase our subjects, their subjects are always in a situation where they're close to somebody that they care about and they have that personal connection. If we're showcasing them in a situation, we want it to be a sound-rich environment. The type of hearing loss that Marie-Claire treats is not a sudden onset hearing loss. It is a mild hearing loss that happens gradually over time. So most of our customers remember what the rustling of the leaves sounds like, remember what the sound of the rain sounds like. And for us to kind of remind them those moments, those experiences that were well-rounded, can help them remember that maybe something is missing from their moment today that they need, that we can help fulfill.
That's fantastic. So, when we first got connected and talked, we talked about similar backgrounds, and I also have worked a lot with franchises. Talk about the challenges that you run into, because you're not just driving everything to a call center in Minnesota where you are, and everybody comes to one store, if you will. They're going to franchises all over the world.
There's many challenges that come with franchising, and there's many opportunities, right? One of the biggest benefits of franchising is that every single person that we work with is incredibly, incredibly invested in the success of the business. And we might have different decisions of how we want to do it. We might have disagree on what the parts that are actually important, but the goal of the campaign or the initiative that we put in place, we're completely aligned on. And for us to make sure that we are supporting those franchisees as well as possible, we need to make sure that we are kind of delivering on our part of the promise. That being said, those franchisees are all individual businesses. And for somebody that has, 100% corporate retail locations or only an online presence, you can have the benefit of a lot more aggregate data when you target completely nationally, or when you target in terms of large geographic areas rather than specific business territories. So it's probably one of the biggest challenges is some of the efficiencies that you can get from true national advertising are not as available in areas where you have to target very narrowly in terms of geography. When you layer on top of that the kind of specific demographic that we have to target, it becomes a little bit more challenging in terms of gaining those efficiencies, which is where there's a benefit to the franchise organization. There's some areas that you're able to aggregate into national programs, but there's specific ones where you just cannot, and you need to make sure that you stay very narrow and very targeted.
So you mentioned Invoca, a great
Yes.
tool that I've used multiple times. What are the other tools that you consider most important as a performance marketer?
Well, Invoca, and you've probably heard me say this in other conversations, is Invoca is kind of the linchpin that ties all of those other tools together, right? It's the connector for us in terms of our online and offline data. So let's look at the online aspects. You absolutely need to have some sort of DMP. You absolutely need to have a way to manage your audiences, understand your audiences, and target your audiences. And you need to make sure that you're driving them to a digital experience that is both clean and easy, as well as trackable. So for us, we're an Adobe tech stack. So we use Adobe Experience Manager, Adobe Audience Manager, Adobe Target, and Adobe Analytics. On, I guess it's Adobe Launch now. On the other side of it is, where do you send that data to? We're a Power BI house. So for us, goes into a data warehouse, which kind of translates itself into Power BI reporting. If I were to say to a marketer, kind of the tools that are most important is you can find the right tool for your budget and for your scope. There's many out there, and there's many that are strong. What's most important is how they all come together and how they all speak to each other. There's not a single tool out there that's a silver bullet, that's a one size fits all, that's going to solve all of your problems. It's going to be a jigsaw puzzle, and how you plan to build that jigsaw puzzle together defines how successful you're going to be.
So when you think about the tactics, whether it's search or social and everything that helps leverage that intent, what are the tactics you most enjoy as a marketer that you see performing well today versus the ones that we hear a lot from people that are so-called experts? But there's a lot of folks out there that are giving advice that I find questionable all the time. So what are the things that you're hearing generally that help you perform better versus the things that you think maybe are more of a myth or a misconception that you hear a lot?
I'm going to go back to the concept of intent, because you need to be very clear in terms of the audience that you're reaching and what that audience wants from you. Let's talk about the most simple and easy one, search, right? It's the beautiful, beautiful platform where the customer is already taking an action. So they're already getting ready for something that is beneficial for them and is ready to convert if you just give them the right experience. And they're telling you in their own words exactly what it is that they're searching for. That using that intelligently is already a very big step. And there are many brands that are not doing that quite to the level that they maybe should. But when you start looking at other platforms, you talk about Instagram, you talk about TikTok, you're talking about Nextdoor, or even something as basic as Twitter and Facebook, there's very different experience, and different consumers go there for different reasons. You need to really understand what your customer is doing there, or what that particular customer is doing there, and bringing them from that platform. If you can't engage with them within that platform, bring them from that platform into another one needs to create as holistic of an experience as possible. Again, and this is probably my most repeated phrase, if there's no silver bullet, there's nothing that is a one size fits all. And to your point, an Instagram follower for Miracle versus an Instagram follower for Coke are going to do very different things. So what are you trying to get them to do? And does that fit with what they're already doing on the platform is probably the biggest area that I'd like to, I guess, in terms of wisdom that I can impart, if there's any. In terms of the challenges that I see with the recommendations from the conferences, we focus a lot on tools. And we focus a lot on the dream of one-to-one personalization, this dream of an omni-channel experience, this dream of a true 360 view of the customer. And the tools are very cool. I think we forget that you have to do something with it, right? You can create a million personas, you can integrate a million platforms, and then what? You still need to be very thoughtful and intelligent as to when, how, and with what content you reach that customer. And somebody still has to create it. Somebody still has to manage that content. Somebody still needs to update that content. Somebody still needs to catalog that content. That aspect of it is so rarely talked about. I think at some point in time at the Adobe conference, there was a content velocity track. And even at that point, it was still so focused on platforms and not so much on processes and resources and strategy that I still don't have an answer. And I don't know that anybody else has.
Well, is it fair to say then that your market in particular is, you said Coke and Instagram. I don't even think of most of the people on Instagram being Coke drinkers anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's more kombucha or something like that, something younger that tastes much worse with less sugar. But is it fair to say that, because I think about this a lot with Facebook's their highest growing demographic is 55 and older. Mm-hmm. From everything I've read, is it fair to say that it gives you a good narrow focus when you're doing social to focus mostly on Facebook? I mean, you're not doing a lot of TikTok stuff.
No, we are not. Facebook has been a very great channel for us, both with the partnership with Facebook specifically, as well as the audiences they have. I mean, they have very long-standing data source for very many of their users. So it's a very rich environment in which to play, as well as the target demographic is there. They've created many different ad types and engagement platforms that really allow you to both engage the audience, specifically our target demographic, as well as get them to convert. So yes, Facebook has been very, very strong for us. But there's also, again, depending on the intent, there's also something like Pinterest. If you think of our audience, right, they love the home and garden, they love the DIY, these types of pieces of content are great for Pinterest, and the longevity of that content is much, much longer and much, much stronger. It's not going to be that conversion content. It's not going to drive people to book that appointment right away, but it's content that helps create that relationship, helps drive that consideration, helps build that pool of first-party data that you can then go after to target for conversion.
So I know that the mindset that I've carried when I've worked at a brand versus at an agency is the same mindset focused on the customer. However, that often gets lost depending on which side most people sit in, because a lot of people have only worked on the brand side or they've only worked on the agency side. How do you look at performance marketing and the customer a little bit differently than how agencies or third parties that support you look at your customer?
I think part of it depends on your partnership with your agency. So having done the agency side for just a little bit early in my career, I found that it was completely infuriating to see clients not follow your reactions, your recommendations, and your clear suggestions that are obviously right ones, especially when you're fresh out of college. All your ideas are brilliant.
$500 an hour.
Exactly. And then that fact is you don't actually get to say the final yes. You don't actually make the final decision. In some cases, almost separates the agency from the true business impact that the initiative is able to drive. On the other side, again, from the client side, you sometimes find challenges with the agency that is so focused on engagement or impressions or top high-level conversions that are not actually impacting the business, that are not the ones that actually pay the bills. And that's where you can have some differences about how you think about it. The challenge really comes from building the right relationship with the right agency. So if your goal is to find a content agency that is able to create that content velocity that we talked about, that is specific to the right audience, and your task of them is to connect with them, to connect with the customers personally and emotionally at the right time, you need to bring that agency in. You need to get them to believe, you need to get them to feel the values and the passions that you have in-house. If your goal is to find reach, and you really are trying to grow that brand awareness and not trying to connect it to the final ROI on the back end, that's a different relationship with the agency. So depending on what you're trying to get out, it's the different level of connection. It becomes additionally challenging for Miracle-Ear or any other medical devices, because then you have HIPAA restrictions, which means that if you need that kind of relationship, you need to find an agency that is able to be HIPAA compliant. And that's not a small feat.
Nope.
So kind of bringing that visibility, bringing that connection, and bringing the depth of data that comes back in a feedback loop is going to change how those relationships work. But again, think about strategically and planfully in terms of what are you trying to get out of that agency relationship, and making sure that you're giving them everything they need to see the full picture the way that you see it.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated by that. I thought about this before. I could have done 2 or 3 shows with you. We could have done a whole show just on HIPAA compliance and then throw a little bit of GDPR type stuff just to add that on top of it, maybe add 2 or 3 more layers. But it's the kind of stuff that the brand folks go through on a day-to-day basis. All right, another question I got to ask. I know since you were originally born in Russia and the Russian word for shark is akula, what is your favorite kind of akula and why?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
They've got them in the Mall of America now. You can
They
see
do. They
a
do.
nice
So
little area.
my cool experiences are between the Mall of America, Underground SeaWorld, and the Minnesota Zoo. And I'd have to say it's probably the tiger shark.
Fantastic.
Very specifically because it is
One of my favorites.
almost unassuming, incredibly beautiful, but still has all the same potential impact, if we're going to use marketing terms, as any other shark.
So Nataly, it's a special time on my show where we get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions you're going to be asked today?
Okay, yes, I'm ready.
All right. Number 1, winters in Minnesota or winters in Russia?
Oh, Minnesota.
Really?
100%.
Why?
Minnesota's set up for winters.
Okay.
You can go from your heated garage to another heated garage to a heated building across the heated skyway without ever having to go outside. Even the infrastructure for the public transportation, which is not huge, is set up with heaters in the bus stops. So it's designed for the cold.
Yeah. I'd rather have winter in Florida. So, all right. Number 2, Mall of America or a normal mall that's not the size of Rhode Island. I mean, the Mall of America is just ridiculously big. Now you can find everything in there, but it's almost a little overwhelming. What is it? 5 floors?
It is 5 floors. You can walk something like 3.2 miles.
Yeah, they got a roller coaster in there. And
they have a roller coaster. So my answer is online shopping.
Good answer. Very good answer. All right. Number 3, because you mentioned them a couple times, Coke or Pepsi?
Water.
Really? Okay.
If I have to, it would be a Coke, because if we're looking at a rum of Coke or a Jack and Coke, it would be a Coke.
Very good answer.
Otherwise, water.
All right. Number 4, you talked about a little theater. So Cats or West Side Story?
I don't love Cats. It's a great production in terms of production value. So West Side Story.
Okay. Well, I would say the answer is neither, because I'm not a musical theater guy. So neither one works for me. Number 5, and the most important question you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Ooh, cornbread.
This is the tough questions we ask. So Nataly, where do people find out more about you, keep up with what you're doing in the world, your thought leadership, and more?
LinkedIn's the best place. LinkedIn, Nataly Huff. You can find me there.
Perfect. Nataly, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This was very fun.
So there was my conversation with Nataly Huff, the Vice President for Miracle Air for Amplifon Americas. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with her. First, hiring, especially getting the right kind of people in performance marketing, is critical. Nataly talked a lot about overlapping roles. And while that may sound clear to your own ears, aligning people on the end goal, your North Star, is critically important, not only for acquisition purposes, but also the ability to truly serve those customers. You've really got to over-communicate that. And something to think about in that a lot of people want to work for Apple or Google or one of those sexier brands, and then they can get behind some corporate purpose or maybe donate some salary to a charity with some of your dollars. But sometimes, and I'll simply add, you can work for some brands like a non-sexy hearing aid company and really make the world a much better place, serving a lot of people rather than just thinking about a cool phone company or a search engine company. If you're truly looking for it, then you can find jobs of service in companies you wouldn't normally expect to think about, but still do a lot of good. Second, really look at your tech stack and how those pieces connect your puzzle. So many brands buy technologies that end up more or less stacking on top of each other, and then you get this big jumbled mess of tech that frightens most brands. But truly understanding how to take any technology and knowing how to stitch it together will really benefit you and your customer. I see it too many times where people buy a new and cool technology, and then they think about some shiny new feature, or procurement sees a great price, but then you don't spend enough time thinking about how to avoid creating a whole new Rube Goldberg machine internally. As Nataly said, it's how they all come together and speak to each other. Luckily, you get to create your own puzzle. Just don't make it too many pieces that just don't fit. Third, fascinating portion where she talked about reminding their customers about moments in a lot of their advertising. She spoke about rustling of the leaves and how they remember. In a way, it's nostalgic. I'm sure you can make something out of that for yourself, but definitely take another listen. But also, and quite simply, marketers need to think more about accessibility. Not just the physical ramp at the door kind, but digital accessibility as well. For them, it's obvious because it's their core demographic, and they have to think through all of those, but also how their customers access content. Again, we should all be thinking about this as the customers we serve. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. I'm so thankful for everyone who listens. So now's the time to go figure out whatever aid you need to listen to your customers. Hope I can help you. You may find some miracles in there once you do. Until then, I'm looking forward to when you join me on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.